Hello and welcome to the Unknown Comics Gaming Podcast, Episode 9. I'm Brandon. There's Tanner. There's Chris.
Yo.
Hope everybody is doing well. We're gonna deviate a little bit for this episode. We're tentatively titling this one "Brandon's Bored of Mini War Games," which I'm not hating on mini war games. I love.
You just didn't drink the Games Workshop Kool-Aid like the rest of us.
I used to. Mm-hmm. I'm just not currently partaking of it, but I still love mini wargaming. I just think there's room in my heart for all types of tabletop gaming. So this episode, we're going to focus on board gaming. But first, I kind of have to break down how my brain works. I have formulated in my head what I'm calling the tabletop org chart, right? And I don't have a graph for this because it wouldn't do anybody good in the audio. But so I see kind of four kind of main groups. You have board games, which to me, in my mind, are out of the box, ready to play, uses pieces, uses boards to move.
So one single person should have to buy the box, and then everybody should be able to play.
Yes, yeah. So, and now you will get expansions and stuff, but they're not required. They just add to the game, and one person can still purchase those. That to me is a board game, and I think by that token, so that encompasses chess, that encompasses Monopoly,
A lot of stuff.
which Monopoly is a horrible game.
I wasn't going to say it, but I really wanted to. You said it for yourself, so.
What?
Monopoly.
Yes.
I was going to make that the example.
It is a board game. I will give it that.
You know, I win at Monopoly a lot, so maybe I don't have a lot of issues. Like you do.
That's probably why.
I'm the one guy having
But
fun.
My thing with Monopoly, no matter how you play it, how you house rule it, if you play it right, if you play it wrong, I don't care. One person is having a good time playing that game, and everybody else is just along for their ride.
Yeah.
I think
Everybody
very
else
few
really hates
games
me when
get.
I play that.
I think very few games actually get finished before the board just gets flipped.
Yeah.
I think that's how Munchkin got created. They were like, you know what? We should just create a game that's Monopoly, but like the same feeling that Monopoly causes.
Right. Or one person just runs away with it. So to me, but you know, even certain card games like Uno and stuff like that, to me, that kind of falls in that category where you just buy the game and it's ready to go. Everybody can play, and that's it. The next kind of group that I would have, what I would call your kind of collectible games, right? So this is your trading card games. Your TCGs, CCGs, ECGs, LCGs, whatever CG you want to have, where you're basically you're buying these pieces. There's no real hobby aspect involved.
Like Magic, Pokemon,
Magic,
HeroClix.
Pokemon, but I mean not even trading card games. Expandable card games like Netrunner or Legend of Five Rings or Marvel Champions, you know,
Ascension. He's deck building.
Yeah. Well, Ascension to me falls as a board game because you're building your deck during the game.
Yeah.
Whereas these other games, you're building it prior to the game and bringing it to the table.
Yeah.
So you're using your collection of cards, or you're using your collection of miniatures in the case of
Like HeroClix.
clicks, right? Or Dice Masters. You're basically pre-constructing all this before you come to the table from your personal collection.
Yeah.
So there's that next group is collectible games. Then we have, of course, miniature wargaming. Mm-hmm. Now, there is traditional wargaming that I still kind of think falls in the board gaming, where like your war game simulators where you're playing with the little cardboard tiles, right? And you're moving it on the poster of the map. So they're recreating like World War II battles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That to me falls under the wargaming. But miniature wargaming, that then has that bringing your collection to the table, much like a collectible game. You're bringing your collection to the table, but then there's also that hobby aspect of it, right? A lot of board games have miniatures. I mean,
Right.
Zombicide.
Yep.
Gloomhaven to a small extent, but not really. You have miniatures for like your characters, and then it's cardboard from then on.
I would say a lot of your newer Kickstarter games, most of those all have some kind of a
Kingdom
plastic
Death,
miniature.
Stuff like that. It's
that
all
actually have different scopes for different things,
and
you know.
Sometimes to ill effect, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And
and-
you're driving up the cost of a game that really maybe doesn't need them. Gloomhaven doesn't need plastic miniatures.
Well,
It's a little paper stock.
And just depending on the game decides whether there's the hobby, because like Kingdom Death has a huge hobby aspect,
Yeah.
but Zombicide doesn't.
Yeah, I mean,
Which- and
you could do a quick
You
something
could.
on them, but why?
But well, and the detail's not enough in the models.
yeah,
So.
it'd be like spray painting them and washing them.
Yeah.
There you go.
So mini wargaming kind of has that subgenre where there's that hobby aspect with it, right? That comes with it. You're playing on nice 3D terrain that is also part of the hobby aspect. And then finally, in tabletop gaming, you have role playing, which is generally narrative based. You're buying books. Everything's written on paper. Yes, you may use miniatures and tiles and stuff to represent some things, but that's not the core of the game. The core of the game is the narrative. One person's curating an experience for everybody else.
And depending on what you're doing, those last two can be really tied together into one campaign.
You can. Yeah, and the problem with I was researching last night. What is the hard and fast classification of board games? There's not one.
Right.
So many different games blend genres together of different tabletop games and borrow elements and stuff and cross over that, like I said, when I kind of created this org chart in my mind, what were the predominant aspects? So board games were all inclusive, collectible games.
Something you brought to the table. Wasn't a miniature.
You bring it to the table from your collection. Miniature war games similar, but there's the hobby aspect, and then of course role playing.
And I think we're seeing more and more of the blending because companies are trying to make their product unique.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's getting harder to classify stuff because they touch on.
Yeah,
everything.
they're wanting to say, okay, I want this audience, but I could get that audience too, right? So I mean, you're trying to broaden that who's going to buy into my product.
Definitely seen that start in the miniature wargaming with like the Privateer Press. The newer starter boxes are coming in colored plastic to try and attract board gamers.
Right. Yeah. GW did it with Blood Bowl.
GW's done that with a lot of their starter
Blood,
boxes.
Blood Bowl was always kind of one of those, one of those hybrids that kind of skirts board gaming, but it also gets miniature gaming.
And they've done that with Blood Bowl. They've done that with some of their regular kind of encompassing Games Workshop. Like you can buy this starter box. You can still use the miniatures and 40K, but they've also done that kind of colored plastic for Sigmar. They've done that
Warhammer Quest.
Yeah. So so that people don't feel like they have to paint it. There is a significant difference between the two.
So for this episode, we're gonna focus on, like I said, what I'm qualifying as a board game, which is basically that experience that you just
Show up and play.
And like I said, there's a lot of subgenres even inside of board games. You have your traditional. I don't like the term family game to classify like a lot of the classic games. I would rather call those classic games because there's a lot of new games coming out that aren't like Azul. Technically, you can teach a kid to play those kind of mechanics, and your family can play a lot of these Euro games and stuff that are coming out that you wouldn't really classify as a family game.
Yeah.
But really, what we would call family game is just,
That's the ones
mass
that are-
marketed,
$10 games at Walmart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. There's a lot of families that are clamoring for a deeper board game experience that they're not going to find in Monopoly, and stuff like that. So
Thankfully, it's grown.
oh my gosh, within the past 10 years, just of course, part of it is owed to kind of the influx of what we call the Euro board game, right? A lot of these weird abstract concepts that really don't depend on theme, like a traditional, American board game would. I'm a sucker for theme. If you create a board game that's in like an intellectual property that I'm on board with, Marvel, Star Wars, Games Workshop or whatever, I'm kind of a sucker. I'll almost forgive a bad game if it captures a theme really well.
Yeah.
A lot of people won't. A lot of people, the game needs to be solid
mechanics. Yeah.
And a lot of Euro games, they, Azul, you're basically putting ceramic tiles down and creating like a mosaic. There's not a lot to that theme, but the actual mechanics of the game are very intricate, and that's why people love it, right? So you can have that balance. I really love it when a game nails both, where
Right.
I get that theme, and then also there's really great mechanics to go with it. So that is, let's see. We've got Euro games that are really kind of infiltrating the market, and their kind of concepts are bleeding into, those more American kind of theme games. So for the next section, let's talk about kind of our favorite board games, and we'll start with you, Chris, because I wrote your name down first.
Okay.
So your first one that you came up with was a game called Quelf, which I had never heard of until you just mentioned it.
Yeah, so Quelf is a fun party game or a big group gathering game. If you've got too many people to play, you can just have 2 people on a team, or but you can play with it as big an amount of people you want to. But it's just a lot of like the cards you pull, they make you do really weird, insane things that you wouldn't normally do. They create these rules that you have to follow, and if you don't follow them, then you have to go back spaces. People call you out on that. I mean, then it really is. I mean, I'm sure I've never played it, with alcohol, but I'm sure it could get crazier that way. But we played it with my family a lot, and it's something that's if you're Christmas time or something like that. I mean, it's a great game to pull out, and I mean everybody that's in there can just have a lot of fun. So yeah, I really like that one. It's a great one. So if you haven't found Quelf or picked it up.
Okay, so your next one, of course, this is one we talked about just a little bit ago. This is probably one of the more popular current, what we would call modern board games in Pandemic. Of course, this is for those watching the video, we're looking at a screenshot of the base version, not any of the legacy versions of Pandemic.
So like Pandemic, and the reason that, there's other games like this, but I like co-op games. I like the ones where
you're playing against
everybody's
of the game.
Everybody's together. No one has to leave mad. We're just all having a good time figuring out how to play.
I've left Pandemic mad. Well, but I'm not mad. I'm not mad at each other,
right? Yeah. So you do a couple of them, kind of an easier, and then you're like, all right, let's make this hard, and then we all go home sad. Yeah. But Pandemic
nothing will crush your spirits like a good game of Pandemic.
Yeah. So Pandemic's one of these games. I like that. I like the co-op. I like some of the deck builders that you like we're talking about with Marvel. Legend was it?
What you're just I'm talking about that.
Well, I know you're going to talk about it. I'm just saying it's another co-op. I like those kind of things where everybody's just you show up, and again, kind of like Quelf, it's not about getting mad at each other or who's going to win or whatever. It's just I really like that aspect of just being able to have fun.
Yeah. Well, and I think like Cards Against Humanity kind of tapped into that. Yeah, you can have a winner, but nobody gives a crap.
Yeah. Every time I play that game, you get to the point where you're just still playing until everybody gets bored.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never counted the cards afterwards. We just play until everyone is ready to go to bed.
So yes, and then Pandemic is definitely one that it wasn't the first to really do that big, what we're calling, what has now been branded as a legacy game, right? Where your games are interconnected.
The first one I remember was Risk.
Risk Legacy was kind of that. And I mean, role-playing games had done that before. And you had other games that there was an ongoing campaign that kind of skirted role-playing a little bit more. And I'll talk about one here in a little bit. But like the Risk Legacy was one of the first ones where you took a well-known board game and made that campaign out of it.
And you're physically changing the board. So when you're done with this 15 game bit, whatever it is, I mean, you can't reuse that again, which is crazy.
You can play a standard game on it, but it's a different it's a unique version of that.
I mean,
game.
You're literally like blowing continents off the world, and aliens are coming. I mean, there's so Risk, Pandemic. I mean, all these different legacy versions. I really like.
Yeah,
again, you're showing up, you're having fun.
And Pandemic Legacy is probably one of the most popular legacy games on the market right now.
Yeah.
It's I haven't had a chance to actually play Legacy Pandemic. I've only played Standard with some expansions, but anybody that I've talked to that's played Season 1, a little less so Season 2. Season 2, I think, didn't hit very well with a lot of people. Season 0 supposedly is really neat, but Season 0, you're not actually, it's Pandemic, but you're not fighting viruses. It takes place during the Cold War, and it's like spy information, but it ties into the overall story of Pandemic too.
That's interesting. I haven't. No.
Yeah. So, so there's that, and then next, this one technically had a campaign to it.
Yeah.
This was Zombicide, which that was kind of a lame picture, but
for the most part with Zombicide, it's again. I mean, you could have 2 people. You could have 4 or 5 people. It depends on what you want to do. But this is, again, you just, if you're wanting to do a strategy game, but you don't want to, have to go and get all the, big, you're playing against the board for the most part. You're playing with somebody else.
You can
got
still
the mission.
you can still screw each other pretty hard.
You can choose, easier or whatever. Yeah, you can. But I mean, for the most part, you're still kind of working together here, and you're just, you're trying to find out, okay, how do we get our guys through here?
Yeah,
and get out alive.
In this particular game, it had a good time when Walking Dead was kind of in its heyday.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's definitely not one that I'd always want to go back. But of course they've done rethemes, right?
Yeah, they've got lots of different things.
They did a medieval one. They actually have a Wild West one that's coming. They just announced that, I believe, last week. Wanted Undead or Alive. Get it? So, CMON, I mean, this game kind of put CMON on the map, for their board games and miniatures. And the miniature quality isn't the best, but they're not bad. They're still paintable.
Yeah, like I said, if you really wanted to, I mean, you could hit them with a wash and a quick highlight, and they wouldn't look bad.
And CMON has done other games since then where the miniatures are amazing, like Hate.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess a lot of it is just what price point are you wanting to hit, right?
Right.
There's a cost associated with that detail in your miniatures and what you want to pack in and stuff like that. People do 3D terrain for Zombicide.
Yeah,
they make 3D versions of the tiles, which is insane to me. And then your last one on the list is probably one that would have made my list. This one is. This one's Firefly the game.
Yeah.
And kind of explain,
So with this one, again, kind of like what I said earlier, if you've ever played this game, it's a hell of a lot of setup and teardown because there are a million little pieces that you have to get.
Lots of decks.
And the decks, there's lots of little accessories that you have to get because you're flying them around. But basically, I mean, you kind of feel, you get your own ship and you're going around the little known galaxy or whatever that they have, and then
the verse.
Yeah, you're having to work deals and choose when you're going to do bad things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like you're, in the show itself.
This is definitely one of those that I think really captured the theme. And I don't think this is for anybody who doesn't appreciate Firefly as a show.
Yeah.
I think
you have to be a fan, I think.
I think a lot of it was kind of fan service because it felt like you were the captain of a Firefly class ship, and you're just trying to get paid, right? You're trying to do work.
It's a good group if you're with other guys or whoever, gals that appreciate the game, appreciate the show. That you're going to have a lot of fun playing.
Yeah,
this.
it's a competitive game, but it's not. At least the core game was not very.
And it really wasn't worried about. You weren't really worried about really beating the other guy, right?
Well, it was a race.
It was a race. You are going to beat.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to win, but it's about. You're still having to work your own angle to get there.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of player-on-player interactions. There was some. Now later,
screw somebody.
Later expansions did add.
Yeah.
Like the Pirates and Bounty Hunters expansion did have ways that you could board each other's ships and do kind of.
Yeah.
You can kind of troll them a little bit, but you were just kind of out there. Your four little ships were out there just kind of floating in the verse, just trying to make their way.
Yeah.
And like I said, it just really captured. They used a lot of. Still images from the television
a lot
show,
of verbiage, everything,
and the movies movie, and so it's still a fun game. I still own it, I always thought that game mechanic would work really well for those that know of it is in the Shadowrun universe, which is a role playing game that's kind of a cyberpunk meets fantasy kind of role. I always thought that there'd be a great opportunity to do that, but IPs and such. So we're moving on to Tanner's favorite couple of games, and the first one is probably one of my first games. That's Axis and Allies.
I love Axis and Allies. I love Risk in general.
Yeah.
But as an avid history buff, Axis and Allies is my jam.
Yeah.
And there's several different ways to play this one. The base way is whichever player captures 3 capital cities is the winner.
In newer versions, you didn't play old school.
Well, I don't think I was born yet.
You weren't.
But my favorite way to play was to go until there was only one player left on the board.
Yeah.
And there's your weekend.
That's Risk style. That's real Risk style right there.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the original, mid 80s, the 84 version, which I inherited from my brother. You had to. You could win the Axis could win an economic victory or capital victory by taking all 3 of the other players' capitals. Regardless, it took forever in the original 2nd edition. Yes, since then,
still took a long time in the newer version.
Yeah.
Depending on who you're playing with, that's totally fine.
Favorite game I've ever played. I was playing against my sister, and she was the Axis, and I had her down to 1 Japanese aircraft carrier, just out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But it was just fast enough that I couldn't catch it to destroy it.
Sounds like a Star Wars movie that I've seen. Maybe it is real.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh man,
it's like chasing somebody's king around the table. And
why didn't
chess.
you just teleport in front of it? Well, then you'd have been okay.
They didn't have teleporters in
Oh.
1942.
He hadn't researched that technology yet. Yeah, and of course, Axis and Allies, many different spinoffs. You had Europe and Pacific, and then you could combine them into a 1940 Global, which is a gigantic.
Yeah, the version I had was 1942 Global.
Yeah. So different iterations.
And you could technically play up to 5 players, 1 for each major power. But it's really a lot easier if you just play with 2.
Yeah.
There's a lot less capitals to have to try and take if you play that way.
Yeah. I always liked playing Russia. Russia was my favorite. I'd try to make like a non-aggression pact with Japan.
Yeah.
So Japan could focus on the U.S. and I could focus on Germany.
Really, you're only
really well.
Russia and the U.S. of course are really set up to win from the get go.
Yeah.
Unless if you're going to play Germany, you have to be really good.
Yeah, you have to come out swinging.
Yeah.
Which is kind of true to history in that. I mean, it does take some liberties with some things, but it's so many freaking pieces. Again, you're gonna spend
time.
You're gonna spend an hour just
Yeah.
getting everything put on the board and everything like that. So, on a different note. So this is Stratego Legends, which I had played Stratego. I'd never played Legends. So what was unique about Legends?
So Legends was a fantasy setting.
Okay.
And you could get different pieces, and it was really my first introduction into the whole like fantasy genre of gaming. It's very similar to like kind of Magic in a way.
Okay.
You have the cards that tell you which piece does what, and each one has a special ability. Some can fly, which lets them move all the way across the board and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the other player doesn't know what the pieces are until you get up to try and fight the 2.
Right.
But with the Legends one, like I said, every piece had a special ability of some sort.
So you're saying there were expansions, and so you could actually.
Not so much expansions, more that the box itself didn't come with all the possible characters.
Okay.
But back when we were playing, I was a little kid, so I didn't know how to get the other characters. I just always played with what the base game came with. But that was really my first introduction to anything that would later evolve into Magic and then miniature wargaming after that. But
Well, there you go. All right, so my first one, and this will probably be my favorite of what I would consider a classic game. And I'm very critical of classic games. I'm not crazy about Risk. I think there is way too much chance involved with Risk. That as good of a plan that you have, the dice could just screw you. It could happen on Axis and Allies, but not to that big of an extent.
What's the game called again?
Risk.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense for everything you just said.
Yes. However, don't get me started on Risk.
I mean, but that's also in like true wargaming mode too. I mean, even in 40K, doesn't matter what your plan is, your dice could
But
screw
when
you
you're
over.
outnumbering somebody 5-1 and you still lose, okay.
Yeah.
Now we got
I
a
got
little
that
bit.
stronghold Madagascar, and you don't know what happened.
Now we got a little bit of an issue. And then, of course, like I said, Monopoly is just crap. But
Crap.
It's just bad. Don't play Monopoly. Clue is probably still one of the games that holds up for me because it's very good if you like that kind of logic puzzle, that deduction, especially if you're playing other people that are good at it.
Yeah.
It's that race to who can put the puzzle together.
Well, and I like it because it's one of those games like you can get quite a few games in a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And and nobody's like really coldly upset about this or that. So again, another fun game to be with.
There are definitely Clue has its kind of downsides. Like sometimes having a turn where you're stuck out in the hall is just like, okay.
Yeah.
It just I think you could probably house rule around that to where you're constantly moving around and at least doing something every turn.
I don't know. I think that kind of adds to it because maybe that was a strategic oops on your part, and now somebody else might get a clue right before you do.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of plays into it.
So like I said, but just that deduction part of it is really fun. Now, I will say there are modern board games that possibly do the deduction part better. If you haven't checked it out, there's a game called Chronicles of Crime, and it's technically a co-op game, but you're trying to solve a crime, and you're interviewing people, and like every card has like a QR code, and you actually like scan it on your phone, and it gives you clues. You can actually like in kind of AR look around a room and try to find stuff and try to deduce the puzzle, and you have like the game is like counting down. Every time you talk to somebody, your counter goes down. So every time you have to go back to a place to look for something, your counter goes down. So definitely check out Chronicles of Crime. It's actually really fun. They've done different themes of Chronicles of Crime as well, like late 1800s England and stuff like that. But that's a very fun game. So we mentioned this one, and we played this a ton at the old store when this came out 9 years ago.
Brandon might have taken really long lunch breaks when he shouldn't have.
Oh my gosh. And we would play like that, even when it was just the core. Like since then, Marvel Legendary is this game. Even with all the expansions, the core game was just super replayable.
You just sit down and you wouldn't want to get up.
Yeah. We would play this. So it is in what we call the deck building genre, which this is deck building being different than like what you would do in Magic. Yes, you do deck building, but a deck building game now has the connotation of you're actually creating a deck inside of the game using the mechanics of the game. And so you're trying to build that engine inside of the game, whereas Magic or something, you're building your engine ahead of time with your collection.
Again, with most deck building games, you're playing against a board and not each other.
Yeah. And there was a small little competitive. I mean, at the end, you could total up points and see who actually contributed the most.
We really ever did that.
Darren liked to do that.
Well, that's Darren.
But you're fighting against the mechanic of the game. You're fighting against the mastermind and his scheme and everything. And so you have this timetable that you're fighting against as you're trying to.
You're flipping over a certain card every so often, and if you flip over too many, then
yeah. You had your villain track, and all your villains are populating the villain track, and bad things happen if they got to the end of the track without being defeated, and then you're building your hero deck this whole time by recruiting, tactics cards. Really, the first Legendary game that came out had the Marvel theme, and it worked really well. They did other offshoots. They did an Alien one. They've done a Predator one, Firefly, James Bond. They came out with recently, and then they had different versions. They had like the Encounters games, which the Encounters games had more of a story that kind of flowed through everything. So you had a lot of, instead of just having a random villain deck, there were stages to it, right? So you could kind of capture like the essence of like the Alien movies and stuff as you played, but it still had that core mechanic of recruiting and playing and doing combos. This game was just super fun, especially when you got your engine really working, and you're, you've got Spider-Man in your hand, and you're literally drawing your entire deck every turn.
That was the worst when you're like, I just need this one, like character or this one card or whatever, and you just couldn't pull it.
Yeah,
like,
and just ways that you could get different heroes to synergize with each other was just a lot of fun, and we played the tar out of it. One of my earliest board games, and this was kind of also my kind of first foray into what would later turn into like Dungeons and Dragons and RPG. This is a game called Hero Quest. This came out in 1989 by Milton Bradley in partnership
somebody in this room was not alive.
Yeah.
His name's Tanner.
But it was in partnership with a little known, at the time in 1989, a little known British company called Games Workshop.
Hey.
So you actually did have
infancy.
Yes.
Games Workshop.
They were selling Warhammer stateside at that point, but it just really hadn't. It was very niche. So Games Workshop made the call to kind of partner with Milton Bradley to kind of create this self-contained board game, which borrowed a lot of themes from the Warhammer universe, but really was kind of its own thing. And you played, everybody grabbed one of the 4 characters. Think Gauntlet. You had your barbarian, your elf, your wizard, and your dwarf. And then you played against, not really the game master, but you played against the sorcerer, who would control all the bad guys. And he was constrained by the rules of the game to try, to move his pieces around, and you had different quests. So this had a campaign aspect to it. You could play one quest. Your characters would gain new treasure and spells and stuff like that, and then you'd go into the next game. To go back and play it now, it wasn't great.
Yeah, doesn't hold up.
It doesn't hold up. However, there's a nostalgia to it. It had 3D terrain. Like you had bookcases and stuff. So when you had all the 3D doors on this big board, because you didn't always use the entirety of the board every quest.
Yeah.
You had certain passages were blocked off or whatever, but you always used the same board. But you had this neat little 3D. You had a ton of miniatures in it.
I think you can get the rules free online now.
Well, they are re-releasing it.
Okay.
So they're doing a re-release. They announced
an original release or an updated release?
I believe it is.
Because if it doesn't hold up, you wouldn't think they would want to release the same game.
I say it doesn't hold up.
If it's the same as the one I'm thinking of, that you could get the rules free online, like it's an excellent way of introducing younger kids to role playing.
I mean, it's the first what I would call a dungeon crawler game, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't really have you had a small narrative to it, but you really didn't have to role play a little bit. You really could just play the tactical game. Like I said, the tactics weren't super deep. Mm-hmm. You ran up to a monster, you rolled your dice. If you hit him, kind of a thing. There were traps. This game would eventually lead to Games Workshop actually did publish an advanced hero quest, where you actually, instead of having a unified board, you had tiles that would come out. Then the next evolution of that, in 94, 95, was Warhammer Quest,
which we're still getting today now.
Well, you're getting a new version of in the Age of Sigmar universe and 40K for the first time. But the original Warhammer Quest was in the old world, and it actually had like a really expansive kind of overall like campaign that really Gloomhaven is probably the next one that's kind of really tapped into that kind of expansive campaign. And as far as dungeon crawlers go, you had Hero Quest and the Warhammer Quest. You didn't see a really dedicated dungeon crawl again till Descent by Fantasy Flight.
Yeah.
And that again was all of the heroic players playing against the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
And then of course it got remade into Imperial Assault, Star Wars Imperial Assault, mm-hmm. and then and now the kind of the big game I just mentioned earlier is Gloomhaven. Really big box game, expansive campaign. Only that game, you're not playing against a bad guy. You're playing against kind of the AI of the game. But,
bad guy.
Gloomhaven is a fantastic game. They're getting a new version coming up called Frosthaven, which is its own kind of self-contained game. They're super huge boxes because you just get a ton of cards and stuff. Yeah. But the game mechanics of Gloomhaven are fantastic. You don't roll dice in the game. You use a pre-built deck for your character, and then you're choosing what tactics to do. It's got a really interesting mechanic that really makes you think about how you need to plot out your turns and things like that. So those are my 3, and so, like I said, I have a ton of favorite games. It was very hard for me to kind of nail down 3, but I had to sit there and think, what are the 3 games that I've played, more than anything, and those were kind of 3 different ones that kind of got me started on board gaming and eventually mini wargaming. I mean, it was games like Hero Quest that got me into Warhammer, because there's similar threads, right? Mm-hmm. And other games like role-playing games and stuff like that in different genres. So there's a couple of games that I've kind of singled out that I'm really excited that are either coming soon or are kind of still in development. Some of these I have technically played versions of virtually through Tabletop Simulator. but not actually at the table. Of course, coronavirus messed a lot of that up, right? So this one is coming out. This is a Fantasy Flight game. This is XMen Mutant Insurrection, and this is a kind of a push your luck dice game.
This is sticking with Fantasy Flight. Not moving.
Yeah, no. This is technically in their board game line.
Yeah, I guess it's not a hobby game, so yeah, would stay. Yeah.
So basically, you pick one of your. There's like 20 different X-Men, and each player picks one, and they get different kind of abilities and dice combinations, and then you're co-op fighting against whatever scenario you have. And this is an evolution of Fantasy Flight. Published a dice game called Elder Sign, which is set in their Arkham universe. This is kind of the next evolution of that game. It borrows a lot of mechanics from that. I'm really excited to play this one. I've seen kind of, Fantasy Flight's posted videos of playthroughs and stuff, and it looks really fun. I think it captures a lot of the X-Men theme because you're traveling to different parts of the world trying to, be the X-Men, right? Yep. And your powers can kind of synergize. You've One neat kind of combination is like if I'm Cyclops and you're Wolverine or whatever, as we play, we can develop good or bad bonds.
We're gonna have roll-offs on who gets to be Cyclops.
It's gonna be a fight. There's other characters I like besides Cyclops.
He gave up on him that quickly.
Colossus isn't there. I'm accommodating. So I'm really excited about this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, I think this is one of those ones that I think the mechanics are fun because push your luck dice games can be fun. But this one, like I said, has that X-Men theme that makes me pretty excited for it.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. That's something we should play on the channel.
So Vampire the Masquerade Rivals. So this is based in the IP of the Vampire the Masquerade, the World of Darkness, which was a role-playing game from the 90s.
Of course, you've got, I think, Vault Comics is actually doing Vampire Masquerade books now. Are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's kind of been a resurgence. There's a new computer game coming out, hopefully this next year. And Paradox Interactive bought the World White Wolf. So they came out with a new version of the role-playing game. Well, now they're pumping their IP out to different games like crazy. They did a game that I've played called Vampire Vendetta, which it's kind of like a bluffing game where you're playing different clans. For those that aren't familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, kind of one of the big themes was you had different vampire clans, and there was kind of this kind of political tug of war between these clans, and I always thought that was a neat aspect of the game. Mm-hmm. So Vampire Vendetta is kind of like a
just a one all vampires are bad. There's actually a little bit more to the whole.
Yeah. They all have their kind of different kind of
letting you inside of it all. That's cool.
Now Vampire Rivals is an expandable card game. So this is one that you would build a deck and come to the table with it, and you could play 2 to 4 players. And there's a lot of ganging up, and
making deals.
Yeah, making deals and playing schemes and stuff like that. And so that one is pretty neat coming out. And then this next one is called Blood on the Clock Tower. And this falls on one of your what you would call a social deduction game. So think Werewolf or Mafia or Resistance, where you're basically trying.
Resistance. Too much time spent on that game.
Blood on the Clock Tower is neat in that you have a storyteller who's kind of facilitating the game, but he can kind of make some decisions on the fly that kind of balances the game a little bit. So if he sees like one group of the good guys are really kind of doing too well, and it's just going to kind of make everybody steamroll, he can kind of do things that balance out the game for the bad guys or vice versa. Yeah. And also, if you've ever played Werewolf, something that's kind of annoying is when you die, your game is done. You don't do anything the rest of the game. In this particular game, you still have a part to play and everything. So you're never completely out of the game. You lose certain abilities, and then there are different roles. So Werewolf does this where you basically pick a role and you have special abilities. Well, in Blood on the Clock Tower, some roles, their abilities don't kick in until they die. So sometimes you want to get killed because you'll be able to contribute to the game. I've played this online. It's still technically in Kickstarter. They're still in production with it. It's coming out of Australia. The one problem I see with this game, it's more fun when you have a group of people that have the same experience with the game, and they're kind of growing in their knowledge of the game together. Because when you have players that know all the roles and how they would interact, and they can kind of think of all the kind of permutations of, well, if he did this and she did this, then that means this. It's more fun when everybody's kind of coming up together on that. Whereas when you have a few that have never played it before and don't know what to look for, and a few that do, because then it kind of skews the game like that. So that is Blood on the Clock Tower, and that's hopefully coming this year. The problem with
Springy.
Don't smack your mic there. Of course, board game production, just like miniature wargaming, the 2020 and early 2021 has been kind of weird for production and stuff like that. And then also gathering together and playing in close proximity is definitely a thing. But
of course, most of your miniature games and things like this are all going to be made in China. So getting all that product over here and everything like that is also.
There's something to be said. Like I said, miniature wargaming is fun. It's still one of my passions, but board game is kind of that fun little diversion, right?
Well, it's nice. It is nice when you can just show up and play.
Yeah.
That's kind of a relief of, I love the miniatures, but you don't have to the haul, or you don't have to worry about, I don't have this thing painted yet, or it's just not all ready yet. So I mean, there's that aspect of just being able to show up and say, okay, let's play a game, let's just have fun, not worry about anything else. So.
Yeah, and like I said, there's different board games for different levels. There are party games that you can play in a few minutes. Or there's those really in-depth like Gloomhaven games where you can have this ongoing, weekly or monthly experience, with all these interconnected games. The board gaming industry is it's massive now. And just the breadth of games that are out there, much like video games. There's a ton of different video game genres.
I think, a lot of people that, keep saying, I think board games, as we see them now, are the way that people are having that face-to-face interaction.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because there are so many people that say, everybody's just social media this, social media that. Well, nobody's doing this and then. I was like, well, you probably just haven't found a group of people that you're doing this with yet.
Right.
Because, I mean, the market for it is huge.
Yeah.
So people are clearly making it happen.
Yeah. And like I said, I've been playing a lot of board games through Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia, a lot of these virtuals, and it's fine. Mm-hmm. It's fine to kind of get acclimated to the game, and it can still be fun. But sitting down with your friends, people and actually having that interaction, that I think is where tabletop gaming really shines, right?
Yeah.
You don't even really get that in video gaming anymore, right?
No.
You don't get together to video game anymore.
No, I mean, when was the last time anybody played split screen,
Well, and I think a lot of that is you're like, man, it'd be nice if I just had this on my own TV screen. So even if you happen to, you'll find a way to do it in another room.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So
you're not going to do it on the same TV.
And like I said, there's a board game out there for everyone, right? My wife, I can't get her to game. I can get her to sit down and play Clue.
Yeah.
Or a card game. She'll play spades or whatever.
My wife's not very big strategy game.
Yeah.
No, but she'll love like Quelf, like I was talking about earlier. She loves that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I can get her to do that kind of stuff all the time.
And you take it where you can get.
That's
it, right. You find the ones that they're into, and you go after that.
And she'll play Clue. She likes Clue.
Yeah.
I love Clue.
Or your kids or whatever, and you'd be surprised. Like you always look at age recommendations on board games,
mm-hmm.
and they say 8 to 8+ or whatever.
I think if you think your kid can do it,
it depends. It definitely depends on your kid,
yeah.
right? Here's the thing: is like
if they can read good enough,
that's a
they
lot.
Can do the words, and you should be all right.
There's and I think one thing I do like about board games is I think it does develop those parts of the brain,
Yeah, it's like every time I tell my kids, I hate doing math. Well, they say you hear people say you do math all the time, and they're not lying because math is teaching you how to problem solve.
Yeah,
you may not physically be crunching numbers, but when you're playing games like that, I mean, like we play Catan with my kids, and different things like that. We're teaching them, okay, what do I need to do to get to this point? What's my goal? So I mean, you're just basically, I mean, that's what you're teaching your kids.
Or you're learning logic, right?
Yeah.
You're learning if I do this, then what happens? Then this, then this, then this. Well, that is the basic.
You're helping them to learn their mistakes in a board game rather than in life.
Yeah. Well, or like say they want to be programmers.
Yep.
Logic is that's what it's about.
Yeah.
You know, it's learning permutations and stuff like that. And actually, I think it definitely helps when you're in charge of making sure the game is flowing correctly. A video game does so much for you.
Yeah.
Right. That you can't do something the game. I mean, unless bugged, but you can't do something the game didn't intend for you to do. Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with some board games, especially when it gets super complicated, be like, oh crap, we forgot to do this.
Yeah. You go back the next day and be like, man, it would have really
we played
changed
this.
things.
We played this completely wrong. Or and in some cases, I hate that this game makes us do this. We're going to play it this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we just do.
Because there's nothing wrong with house ruling something, so that's more fun for everybody.
Yeah. As long as it makes the game fun and
it
doesn't
makes sense.
Yeah.
You might as well.
That you just do it. So this was my rant on board gaming. I think next week we're actually gonna delve into another part of the org chart.
Something I've never done.
Role playing games.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
super
gonna get
excited.
schooled.
Well, so I've never had the opportunity to actually play, but I have read the rule books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so
I've just
we'll
heard
save
it
that
from
for
the
next
other
week.
side of the room. I'll talk about that.
Yeah. So next week we're gonna talk about that a little bit.
Are we going to say what it is?
role playing games? That's
Okay.
it.
I didn't know if you actually said
Yeah,
it.
I think I did.
I think we just kind of talked about
Role playing
games. RPGs.
RPGs. To your get in your book, write down your character sheet, roll some dice,
D&D.
or not. D&D being the biggest one, but there's so many different great
Stranger
ones.
Things.
I know that's what I was thinking. Stranger Things.
I think
they have a don't they have a D&D kind of Stranger Things?
I think they've
kind
done
of
a
cover
I think
now?
I think they've done a module for it.
I know they've done
It's
some like
funny
comic book
because
crossovers.
it's just all of Stranger Things came out of the actual D&D rule book. So
yeah,
it's
well,
like,
a lot of the character names and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah. There's definitely a renaissance of the role-playing game, and I think especially, with live streaming and stuff, it's gotten really popular for people to watch. It's become a spectator thing. If the players are good at what they do, it's very fun and interesting to watch.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next week.
yeah.
Tanner, what do we have coming on the gaming channel this week?
So this past week was kind of off just because here in Texas we got a lot of snow. It kind of put our production behind. But next week we should be looking forward to some unboxing videos. We've got some Forge World stuff here in the office that I'm dying to get open. We've also got the supplies to build our game table here in the Danger Room.
Yeah, the studios are painted.
Studios are painted.
So now we just got to get, physical items inside of them to use.
So we have the wood for the table. We've got some paint left over. We're going to get it all looking nice. I've picked out some battle mats for Chris to order for us, and we'll be getting some games here on the channel.
We got some dice
very
mocked up.
soon.
We having some nice custom dice made, new dice boxes. We've got a lot of cool stuff we're kind of working on, getting looking.
And maybe we can get some of the
Professional.
games we talked about today. We can get a store
Yeah, I'd
copy
love
of.
to start doing some board games. We're as you know, we're opening up our retail area, so board games are going to be a big thing that we're actually going to start carrying here. So, as far as this new XMen game and things like that, I'd love to get that in hand so we can actually try that out.
We should put like a little plexiglass windows on our table, and we could start playing like Magic and Pokemon. It'd be like watching poker on ESPN.
Oh, where you have the little
show your
camera.
hand.
That would be kind of cool, actually.
We shall figure this
Get some
out.
little pin cameras.
Well, I figured if we even did some over the shoulder, it'd be kind of sucky. because we'll see it on the confidence monitor. But
Yeah, we'd have to be.
maybe it'd be like this one's not on the confidence
Whoever's
monitor.
sitting across from the monitor is gonna win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, if you go and watch like Magic and stuff, sometimes you just, you go in knowing what their decks are.
you guys close your eyes.
And then you just watch as people play.
It's funny
stuff.
because I watch Infinity bat reps, and they tell you everything that's in their armies. And I'm like, wait, you're not supposed to know everything that's in
Yeah,
their
just make
armies.
the other guy leave the room first. Yeah, you make them leave the room, explain their armies, bring them back in, then you play, and you kind of know what's coming. So yeah, awesome stuff coming down the pipe. Board gaming. We'll talk about RPGs next week. Chris, besides this podcast and where they can get it, how else can they find Unknown Comics?
Yeah, so if you're listening, thank you. On the iTunes or on Audible or on Spotify, any of those fun things. Of course, on YouTube, if you're watching, thank you. Like and subscribe to the channel. Please share with your friends. We hope to have a lot more of this other content rolling out soon, like
what
unboxings.
What are some of your favorite board games?
Yeah,
leave it in the comments. Let us know.
Tell us what you like. Tell us if there's something you think we should be playing. We're really going to start doing a lot of this stuff here on the channel, having game nights, and we plan on doing some of these games live, some of it pre-recorded, and then of course, if you're looking for us on Facebook, follow us at Unknown Comic Books, on Instagram at Unknown Comic Books, Twitter at Unknown_comics. And then, of course, on Pinterest. Yeah, you can find us on Pinterest as well. So I really appreciate you guys following us, liking our pages, sharing things, and, of course, sharing with your friends so they know to like all the cool stuff as well.
Well, again, thank you for joining us for episode 9 of the Unknown Gaming Podcast. Thanks, and have a great week.
Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.